What's up everybody, DLDS Gaming here. Should be a pretty quick one. We're going over weapons today. Shout out to Raven Pyros again. We're using his website for the tier list. And should be a pretty quick one. We're just going to go over the 10 legendary weapons. It's not that I don't think the epics are valuable, but the team let us know that there's not going to be any rare weapons. So basically your epics are going to be your bottom tier. I say bottom tier, but not necessarily bottom tier, but they're going to be the first things that you unlock since there's no rare before you get to them. So obviously do whatever you feel is best for your account coming out of the Godforge minigame. But I personally recommend grabbing a legendary just because we don't know how hard it's going to be to get to the legendary weapons versus how easy the epics might be if they unlock low levels. And if you'll bear with me for 1 minute, something I always forget to plug. If you go to the Fateless store, store.fateless.gg, you can see all the sweet stuff they have on there. I myself got a couple of the stickers, mousepad, and I got a few other things that aren't right in front of me right now, but you can see they got t-shirts, hoodies, a lot of cool stuff. I actually got a code, DLDS10, so if you use that when you check out, you get 10% off the store. So yeah, just something I always forget to plug in. If you're looking for merch, why not save a little bit? But getting back to the tier list, one of the cool things that Raven Pyros has built in is you can just click on the weapon and get the description to pop up. So we'll be using that to look at all the weapon descriptions. And might as well kick it off with this first one. Aegis has a 15% and grows up to 33% chance to reflect a disable back to the enemy. Will always reflect the first disable. So I guess in case you're new to Godforge, they have debuffs and they have disables, and disables are more control style, like your taunts, your sleeps, those kinda. They're usually lumped in with debuffs in other games, but they're disables in Godforge. So you're not reflecting all debuffs, you're just reflecting those disables, but it's still really strong, not being able to be controlled by the enemy team. And a 15% chance is pretty weak, but once you get it up to 33%, that's a great chance to reflect a disable. And you're not just blocking it, you're reflecting it back to the person, back to the enemy placing it. So it's even stronger than just blocking the disable. So I think it'll be really top tier once you get into the game deeper. But as far as a selection from Godforge quests, I'm going to throw it in A tier. I think it's good, but not one of the best. And now we have Ame-no-Nuboko. Gain 1 stack up to 7 once it's leveled up of Temporal Aegis 2, which reduces turn meter reductions by 15% per stack, and stacks are removed at the end of the hero's turn. Or Arcane Aegis 2, reduced divinity reductions per stack. Stacks are still removed at the end of the hero's turn when the turn meter or divinity is reduced by an enemy. I'm sure there's going to be some content in the game where this is really useful, and you're probably facing a boss or waves of enemies that have a lot of divinity or turn meter reduction. But right now we don't really have any confirmation of what we'll be going up against. So I think this is one of the lower tiered weapons, especially when the stacks are removed at the end of the hero's turn. So you don't get the buff unless your turn meter or divinity is reduced. And then you don't really get the benefit from it unless the enemy takes more turns and tries to reduce it more before you get a turn. So I'm going to throw it down to C tier. I think it's going to be real niche and probably not a strong pick coming out of Godforge quests, especially since you only get 1 stack off the base form. And same thing as all these weapons, you don't know how quickly you're going to get the stacks, how quickly you're going to be able to level them up to get the most out of the abilities. Next we have Aten. Damaging debuffs inflict 10% up to 70% increased damage. I think this one sounds really good once you start getting towards the middle upper tier of maxing it out, but at the same time, sometimes bosses are capped at the amount of damage that damage and debuffs can do to them. So unless this overrides it, it might not have that much utility across everything. Could be something that's great for waves and going in the arena and doing all this extra damage from damage dealing debuffs, but we're not sure how much utility it will have across the whole game. And The base version is just doing 10% increased damage. So I think as far as selecting it from the quests, this one's also lower, but I think it's when it's fully maxed out, this could be something that's S tier. If you throw it on something like a Sizzin or a Ra that has AoE damage dealing debuffs and explodes them, could be incredible for wave clearing. Could easily go into S for wave clearing and potentially arena depending on how easy it is to place these debuffs and or how easy it is for the enemy to just block debuffs. Next we have Excalibur. There's a little bit of a, I don't know if it's rounding issue or cutoff issue on the text, but increased damage inflicted by allies each time it goes up by 0.5%. So this is 3.5, 4, 4.5, 5, 5.5, 6. So anyways, increased damage inflicted by allies by 3% increases to 6% for each buff placed on this hero. Yeah, we know there's some pretty buff heavy heroes just coming out of Godforge quests, so it should be easy to get these stacks pretty quickly. But just to clarify, the buffs have to be placed by the hero wearing Excalibur. It's not total buffs on a hero, and it only includes the active buffs placed by this hero, so it's not stacking as buffs fall off and get placed again. Still a really good strong boost of damage, and the nice thing about it is you're pretty in control, whereas Aegis you have a 15% chance up to a 30% chance, so you're taking a chance. This one, you know what hero you're going to place it on, how many buffs they have, how many buffs they can keep up, so you have control over how much damage increase you're going to get for your allies. I think the 3% is pretty low, but I still think it belongs in S tier, just because you're in control and it should be pretty easy to get those stacks with some of the heroes that place some crazy amount of buffs. And next up we have Forgefire. Reduced damage received by 10 up to 28%. Does not receive damage per wave until this hero takes their first turn. So it's great. You're getting damage reduction after you take your first turn, and until you take your first turn, you're not receiving any damage at all. I know one of the knocks on this weapon is the other team can CC you, and then you take your turn, but you don't get to take your turn because you're CC'd. But even though you miss your turn, you still have this damage reduction to help you get back around to your next turn and survive whatever's coming your way. So I do think that's a totally valid knock against this weapon, but it also kind of has a built-in backup plan where it gives you this damage reduction. Nice thing about this is it's plug and play with basically any hero. Any hero you get damage reduction on is going to be great, and for that I think this is also top of S tier right now. This one I'm going to butcher, but Maquahuitl? I think that's as close I'm going to get. I think this one's really cool. Attacks reduce enemy HP, attack, and defense by 5%, stacking up to 1 to 7 times once it's maxed out. So at max, you're getting a 35% reduction to HP, attack, and defense, which it's great that those three, because no matter what, you're really limiting the enemy. If they're a Slayer and do attack damage, bringing down their attack. If they're a support or brawler, you're bringing down their HP so they're less survivable and, again, less damage. And defense is going to be really strong, because not only are you going to lower the defense on defenders, a lot of their shields are based on defense as well. So you're going to lower the strength of their shields and all types of stuff. And we don't know how bloated boss stats are going to get, so this could be extremely strong against bosses, getting such a strong stack, reducing all those stats. My only knock against this, like the others, is you don't know how quickly you're going to level it up. So at the start, you're just going to get that 5% stack, which is nice, but I think that limits this to A tier. But again, this is one that once you get into the end game and you get leveled up, I think it jumps up to S tier. For some reason I know how to say this one and I still butcher it every time. Mjolnir. Every third hit inflicts 50 up to 110% increased damage. I think I've kind of underrated this one myself, just because it doesn't sound that impactful every third hit. But if it is based off hits, it's going to be pretty insane for some multi-hitters. Like Sun Wukong has his 8-hit attack, where if you attack the same enemy, you deal decreased damage on, I think, the last 4 hits. I forget off the top of my head. You're going to get yourself guaranteed 2 of these, which could be really clutch in bringing some of the later hits that have the decreased damage back in line with the first hits. And also someone like Dracula, his ultimate is a 3 or 4 hitter, so you're guaranteed to get one of these strong hits off on his ultimate. So I really think this could lead to some crazy damage, especially with some AoE nukers. A lot of them do have multi-hit attacks, so I think this weapon's actually sneaky strong. And originally I thought I was going to put it in A or B, but I'm going to throw it up in S tier. Now we have one of the most heavily theory-crafted weapons, Namsaru. Buffs placed on this hero are instantly removed, granting 5 up to 11% divinity and turn meter, and grant a permanent damage increase of 5%. And if I remember right, it was confirmed that the damage increase doesn't carry over wave to wave. Overall, I think this will be incredibly strong. Even at the base level, you're only getting 5% divinity and turn meter, but the real big part of this weapon is getting the permanent damage increase of 5%, especially on boss battles or even the Pantheon boss, where it's a long, prolonged battle. You're going to get a chance to really boost up the stack. The only downside, obviously, is that you're not going to get any buffs on the hero, because they're just instantly getting ripped off for the divinity and turn meter and the damage boost. And depending on the team you're running, you might have to be careful. If you're running some sort of strict speed tune, this boost could mess up your speed tune. It's something you'll have to account for. But on second thought, that probably doesn't matter that much, because you're not going to have any buffs on this hero anyways, and it's going to be your damage dealer, so it's not going to matter. You're not going to have to worry about outrunning buffs when you don't have any placed on you, so I guess that's kind of a non-issue. Unless your damage dealer is doing something you need the rest of the team to count on at a specific time, but that's pretty unlikely. But my only knock against this weapon is I don't think it's a great pick coming out of Godforge quests, because early game you're going to want the buffs to keep your heroes alive, and I think by the time you're able to really benefit from this, there's probably a good chance you'll be able to farm it. And again, we don't know how rare legendary weapons will be, but I think it's more of a mid to end game weapon than early game, and hopefully you can just start working on farming it at that point, and you won't have to worry about it being your weapon from the quests. I still think it's super strong, and will definitely be S tier later, but for a selection from the mini quest, I'm going to throw it in A tier. And we have Thunderbolt. When this hero joins an attack, increase their turn meter and divinity by 5%, increasing to 11%. I think this weapon's super niche. For example, if you have Sun Wukong locked in, then this might be a weapon that you want to select just because he has a chance to join attacks on his passive. So you'll really be getting a lot of boosting from him joining attacks with his random chance to join. Whereas the only other time that you'll really get a benefit from this is if it's on a hero that's on a team with an ally attacker, like Vivian or Smash, and there's a few others that we know about. Personally, I would probably only lock it in if I had Sun Wukong and I didn't want one of the other weapons. I don't think an ally attack hero is going to get around to their ally attack enough to make this super useful, but again, in super niche situations could be really good. For that, I'm going to throw it down here in B tier, and that brings us to the last weapon, Worldsplitter. Each time this hero lands a strong hit, increase their strong hit damage by 10%, and reduce their incoming damage by 5%, stacking up to 1 to 7 times. So there's another one, once you level it up, it will be really strong, getting that 35% damage reduction and 70% increased strong hit damage. But depending on the heroes you have, strong hits could be hard to come by. It's something you would want to build a hero for strong hits or have on a team with precision or sharpen to make sure you're getting your strong hits. But even then, if the hero's not eternal, you're going to have weak affinities to deal with, so it's still kind of hard to build for. Again, unless it's eternal, then you don't have to worry about the weak affinity matchups. So even though it's really strong, I think this is another one that's pretty niche. I think I'm actually going to put it above Thunderbolt though, because I think it'll be easier to build a hero to strong hit than it will be to get a huge boost from joint attacks. So yeah, that's my personal weapon rankings. This is my alt account, but as you can see, I have Forgefire locked in myself, so practicing what I preach. But just because these aren't S tier doesn't mean I don't think they're bad. I kind of think all of A tier will be great. I just think they're kind of more end game once you can farm legendary weapons and boost up the ranks. And I don't even think any of the B tier are bad. I think the B tier ones are just pretty niche, or you need a specialty build to run them. This one, we'll see. Not totally sold on it. I think maybe if you started with a stack of, I don't know if that would be too OP, but if you started with one stack of both of these and then you gained another stack on top of it, I think that might bump this up the list, because then you're already getting the benefit of the buffs, and then if your turn meter or divinity is further reduced, then you can get the stacks and start rolling. Still pretty niche, but at least you'll have that one stack to get you started. Basically, I think all the S tier ones are going to be helpful right off the bat. I think Forgefire is just great because you can plug and play on any hero. Excalibur is great because you can have a bit of control over how much the damage increase you're going to get. And Mjolnir will be a quick and easy boost to your damage dealers right off the bat. And I guess before closing out, it's worth mentioning that essentially down to 10 days left of Godforge quests. So if you haven't jumped in, it's a little late to get started, but you might be able to farm enough Aether if you're active enough to get a weapon and or imprint, even though it's too late to get a hero now. But also just a reminder to those that already started, you got 10 days left to farm up the Aether and finish out. Make sure you get your weapons and imprints if you want them. But yeah, just make sure you're paying attention to how much time you have left and what you're trying to lock in before the minigame ends. But now that's it for me. Have a good one.